So today I'll be talking about project costing. Project costing is very important. It is the type of activity that needs to be undertaken by the project planner. And in this context, project cost is significant to determine the life of the project versus the cost needed to run the project. And therefore, it is important for you to learn this section. You need to know any project at a time might be affected by the planners. Some project planner may overestimate part of the project. That may lead into the cost overrun. Some project planner might be able to underestimate the project. They may cause some trouble in the future, and the resources are scarce. And therefore, because the resources are scarce, we need to utilize the available resources fully in order to avoid the future crisis. Therefore, in this context, again, you'll find cost estimation is the baseline for you to examine the future project implementation. Now, the main objective of today's lecture is you shall be able to understand the different costs required for the projects. We might not be exhaustive to mention all types of projects, but at the end of the day, you will know what type of cost and how to measure those costs. And also, you need to estimate, you need to analyze, to explain those costs based on the planning mechanism that we require. Therefore, then at the end of the day, we shall be focusing that way. You should remember one thing. There's no favorable wind for those who do not know where to go. If you don't know where to go, if you don't know how to measure costs, if you don't know why are you buying that particular commodity, if you don't know why are you spending on that activity, there is no favorable wind for you. Before you go to the market, you must sit down and understand the cost implication for you. Why do you want to go to the market? You can't just pop out and start going to the market without sitting down with a piece of paper, write down. It is possible. You may go around the corner and buy some stuff rather than going to the malls and so on. So this is important for you to know that you have to sit down and plan. You cannot be able to spend all the time. Money is scarce. So if you know money is scarce, therefore you have to sit down and plan for your costs. We say this in our introductory remarks. Correct estimation of the cost is the foundation of examining a feasible cost that the project can run. We want to know how much the project requires so that they should be able to run. Resources are scarce and risky for the organization to spend those scarce resources. We are limited with wants. Planner must sit down and examine feasible costs to run the project, whether it is a non-profit or it is a profit-making, but make justification of your cost. Planner must avoid cost underestimation. Planner must avoid cost overestimation. All these have some implication when you are running your project. And therefore, this calls for a proper cost estimate among project managers. And if this is the case, then I will say you must avoid overestimate or underestimate, and therefore it's not good practice. And you must also remember that most of the project costs are based on the nature of the project itself. Consider health-related project. Consider construction project. Consider manufacturing project. Consider a bridge construction. Consider school construction. Consider education project. Consider orphanage center project. Consider so many projects. They differ. They differ. And therefore, the nature, the way you will sit down and start forecasting, looking for the actual costs, is different from someone who will look from bridge construction project. The bridge construction project, it has some baseline on how you should estimate. Health projects, you talk about the drugs, nurses, doctors, beds, so on, salaries, and so on, all these kind of things, machines required for the projects, and so on. Manufacturing projects, you talk about machines itself, the technicalities, the labor intensive, how many people will be needed, what type of machines are required to run the projects. You will be talking about repairing, depreciation, and so on. All these will add about the costs. And don't forget about, in some cases, you will have to refer the International Financial Reporting Standards to estimate those costs, especially when it comes to depreciation. You need to know if you are about to estimate that we require a vehicle for the projects. You need to compute depreciation charges for the vehicle, and so on. This is just the example for you to look at the costs. Now, when we look at the concept of estimating costs, we are saying estimating has a different meaning to each of us, most of us. It has a different meaning. Estimating, when you're estimating, you might be talking about estimating the size of something in a square feet, estimating the weight of something, estimating the distance. It's about diameter, computing the diameter. It's about miles, mileage. It's about kilometers, radius. It's about length. It's about hours. It's about man days. It's about masses. It's about tons, and so on. All this is about estimating the size of something. And this is the base for you to establish. There's so many things you may recall yourself. That is what we call it, estimating. Estimating can be defined as the act of approximating the worth or the cost, extent, quantity, quality, character of a future action, the events or the product based on the data or information available at that time. Because you are looking, you are approximating. So you have to develop the capability to forecast. And most planners, because they have good background on computation, this becomes not a problem. So your normal basic mathematics and planning tools becomes useful when you are now talking about computing or forecasting your cost for any product. And therefore, all project activity are estimated. This is what I could say. So all these, you call it manpower, the material, facilities, all these costs must be estimated. Must be estimated. Even if it is a project of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, you have to estimate the cost of electricity. You have to estimate the costs of transport, fuels, how many liters you're going to use, how many liter of fuel this project will consume. This is the power of estimation, and the project planner need to understand that it is worthwhile take much time to dwell and estimate the project cost. What again we say, what is cost? What is cost? Cost means the amount of expenditure incurred on a particular thing. The amount of expenditure incurred on a particular thing. Once costs are known, project manager can easily make a proper decision regarding the project with available resources, whether they can meet those resources or they might not meet. So it's important. When we look at cost helps the project manager to make a decision. Otherwise, a project manager cannot make any type of decision if he cannot be able to understand what are the total costs for these projects, what are the variable costs, what are the fixed costs, and so on. And therefore, this is the best one you have to consider when running. But when you are running a project, you also need to consider the cost drivers. When you are estimating your costs, remember there are cost drivers for each element in each year. Cost drivers, these are various items associated with activity that can have impact, either minimal or significant. These are the cost drivers. Managers must accurately understand and document the impact that the cost drivers are anticipated to have during the estimation time. So you may consider any project has, any cost has some cost drivers. Among the cost drivers that we will talk for today, you will need to think out of yourself. But this is not just limited for the discussion. It includes the following: the quantity of material. The quantity of material given, the quantity of a given material on a project affects the unit of supplying that item. This is not just supply, it's not just like a supply and demand issue, but also one of the production efficiency and the economy of scales you will have to consider when you are talking about quantity of material. How much is the quantity of material needed for that project? These are the things that you'll have to ask yourself. If it is a manufacturing, how much quantity is needed? If it is construction, how much quantity is needed? Quantity of material, quantity of labor, how many times you will have to supply the labor, how many times you will have to supply the bars, how many times the sand is required, how many times the aggregate is required, how many times the chipping is required, and so on. All these will be the cost driver for the project. And this can be technical, because at one time you need to understand the scale can be determined whether you buy in large quantity or you buy in small quantity. If you buy in large quantity, remember, the cost will be lowered. And if you buy in smaller quantity, remember, it might not be effective for you and it might be cost for the projects. Because if you buy in large quantity, you are likely going to get a discount, and that discount will favor your project cost. And many producers are open and they are happy when you approach them and deciding to buy in large quantity. They will definitely give you a discount, and that discount will lower the cost of running your project versus the small quantity of which you will have to buy from time to time. These will add up and bring more cost to the project. And therefore, strategically we say, manager must understand the cost driver. Go for large quantity purchases where you will have a discount, and that discount will lower cost of your production, the cost of the project itself. Another cost driver is the classification of work itself. The type of work, classification of work. Some work must be performed by hand, will be more expensive than a similar work that can be completed by machines. Okay, so you need to know. Is it labor intensive? Is it capital intensive? Which one is affordable? So all these are the cost drivers that you need to know at the end of the day. While you are estimating those costs, you also need to understand the cost driver, the price volatility for your material that you think you will buy. So you sit down and plan for price volatility depending on the quotations and the time horizon itself, the date of delivery, and so on, the possible shortage, the possible surplus, and so on. All these will depend on the planner themselves or the project manager to make a decision. If you want to buy, you want to make storage of something today, maybe it is maize and so on. You consider buying maize during the harvest time. That can be a good target for you. So the price volatility of your material required to implement the projects will determine how much you require for you to run the project. Another point that you will be required to consider is availability of materials. You need to plan for possible shortage. Okay. When you plan possible shortage of raw material and so on, you will understand the pricing nature for yourself, and that can be the cost driver. The location. Where are you located? Where is the project being located? Okay. If you are located in a rural area, is different from someone who is being locating his project in an urban area. If you are located in a very remote region, you'll have to understand what are the costs driver for you being located in a very remote. So all this will depend on the type of the project that you consider you'll be running. Again, as I said earlier, what is the type of your project? What is the type of your project? What is the type of your organization? All these will determine the cost driver. You may consider series of items when you are starting a project. When you are starting assessing the costs, for example, you may start with capital items at year zero. For most planner, we have to dwell. What are the important items when it comes to year zero, before project production has started? That is the year zero. It's very important. You will have to consider costs like the land, okay? Land development itself, building, plant and machine. You need to estimate these costs properly without any failure, and therefore you must always avoid the failures. You may include other costs, human resource. What are the possible human resource needed for that project? You need director, you need managers, you need secretary, you need security, you need supply officer, you need accountant, you need planner, you need an economist, you need security guard, you need a driver, you need so many items you need to identify, to examine based on the nature of the project. What about taxes? What about taxes? Pay as you earn. The corporate taxes must be estimated. What about the audit fee? Because at the end of the year, your project will be audited. You must predict the audit fee, how much? What about the equipment? What are the types of equipment that are needed? What about materials? What about stationaries? What about electricity, telephone bills? These are among the important things that you consider. And so on, and so on, and so on. Cost estimation, it helps setting the benchmark for productivity improvement and the programs. It helps in determining if the product or the services can be sold at a profit. It helps in evaluating how much capital can be justified for changes. It helps in examining a feasible way of implementing a program or a project. And that's why cost estimation becomes an important tool and the baseline for all our planning for the project. So when you're planning a project, you must classify them. Classifying it, you must know you have the direct cost. That is one of the classification, or the indirect cost. So identify what are the direct costs and what are the indirect costs. What are the fixed costs? What are the variable cost. So it is from this early beginning, information regarding the direct cost related to the project and the indirect cost related to the project must be reviewed. And the project planner has a role to play in classifying the direct cost and the indirect cost with a possible strategy when you are running. Now, what is the base for you to estimate? When we are estimating, we have to make assumptions. And we have to write down some notes based on the assumptions that we are making. We have to understand. In some cases, you can make estimates, but you take into consideration the assumptions of inflation, so you make notes why there are going to be inflation at the time. Make analysis. The basis of estimates documents includes the project information on previous developed project scope and schedules, schedule data from which the project cost estimates can be prepared. And that is the point. And therefore, what do we say? The level of detail provided in the basis of the estimates varies depending on the project phase. Are you in which phase right now? Are you at identification? Are you in a preparation? Are you looking at the implementation? Are you looking at so many stages? So it will depend on the project phase, the type of the project, the complexity, but also the design of the project itself and assumptions with the scope details related to that project. It's also important. When you have already estimated your cost, you must get management approval for the cost. And therefore, management will give you the endorsement whether they should be able to run or not. This will determine on how you have estimated. So it is you who can mislead them when you are managing a project, and therefore you must obtain the management endorsement. The cost estimation is just summing up the estimates for individual items. In the total, this is what we get. And as I said earlier, that can vary. These estimates can vary in size, in number, depending on the type of the project, and also if it is a construction, if it is a manufacturing, if it is a healthy project, they will differ in terms of size and the duration itself. 1 year, 2 days, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So you need to sum up some items in terms of either week or daily or per items. Then it gives you the total. So you can use the bottom-up approach, or you can use the top-down approach when estimating your cost. And again, I said earlier that when you are looking at the project, you must understand what are the variable costs and what are the fixed costs. And in terms of variable cost, we say these are the costs that change proportionately in total with the activity level within the relevant range. Fixed costs, these are fixed costs that do not change in total activity level, changes within the relevant range of the activity. So these are fixed. These are fixed. The other variable cost, we say costs that change proportionately in total with their activity level. So they vary with the level of output. But fixed, they are fixed. So we have series of examples, and when we talk about this one, you will develop a graphical approach for the variable and for the fixed cost to understand how the nature they should look like. For example, you will talk of the fixed costs must be fixed. They do not change with output, whether the output goes down or goes up. They are fixed all the time. So you'll find the graphical, it's a straight line, but with those variable costs, they tend to increase, and they depend on the level of output for which you intend to produce. Now, for us to get the total cost, of course, at that particular time, it will be about getting the total cost will be equal to total fixed cost plus total variable cost. So in simple language, it will be like total cost is equal to total fixed cost plus total variable cost. That gives you your total cost. This is the baseline, and all planner must comply into this one, because this one can bring you into a complicated computation, and other estimates will have to follow based on these estimations we are talking about, where we say total cost is equal to total fixed cost plus the total variable cost. And now once these are known, total fixed cost is known, total variable cost is known, total cost is known, then you can easily understand what will be the average fixed cost, AFC. What will be the average fixed cost, AFC. The average fixed cost, we say this is equal to total fixed cost divided by the quantity itself. That will give you the average fixed cost for that particular project. Okay, so that is also important for you to understand. And average variable costs, average variable costs will be is equal to total variable cost divided by the quantity. And remember, these are variable costs per unit of output, Now, when you have the average total fixed cost and the average variable cost, when you add them together, it will give you average total cost. So average total cost is equal to average fixed cost plus average variable cost. And that will give you the average total cost at the end of the day, and you may find yourself understanding what are the costs that are supposed to be determined at the time. Now, there are different approaches that people may use when they talk about cost estimation. You can measure your cost for the manpower. For example, you are doing a construction project. This is construction project, and you want to come up with some cost estimates, but you don't know how many labor you require, how much you will need to pay them. So you can develop your own estimates, of which at the end of the day, you may find you can have details regarding the skills of people that you have. Maybe you need to have engineers, what type of engineer, the quantity survey, the QS, quality surveyors, you can have the architecture, you can have the civil engineer, you can have the laborers, the mason, and so on. You need also to estimate, develop another estimates how many days you will use them. So each of one must be justified. And then how much is the cost per person? So in terms of days, then it will give you the total. Once you know the total, then you can develop the exact cost for that one. Now, all this will depend on the type of the project that you consider yourself. It is important for your estimates. But most of the time, what we do is you'll have the quantity column, and you'll have the unit cost, and you'll have the amount that will give you the cost resource form for material, for equipment, for transport, for labor, for human, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. Now, before I stop for today, this is part one. What is year zero? Consider your project that you want to undertake. What are the key items that you will include in year zero? Identify a project of your choice. Examine costs for the period of 24 months. Make assumptions for your costs. Explain with notes each items you are including. Classify them in terms of fixed and variable costs. This activity must be submitted by tomorrow. Draw graphs showing key cost estimates for the trend of 24 months. If you have any question, please, you can call me. My number is 0745 44 56 52. Thank you. Appreciate so much.